The next speaker in this session is Farzana Adams. Farzana is Head of Global Quality and Technical for Zespri International. She's also the New Zealand Director of the Fresh Produce Safety Sector, a Trans-Tasman organisation, and she's going to be giving us an industry perspective on food safety priorities.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Farzana toko ingoa, no Fiji o ko tipuna, ke te noho au ki Papamoa. My name is Farzana, I am from Fiji and I live in Papamoa. And it's an honor and a privilege to speak to you today about industry food safety priorities. I did shamelessly talk to my peers in the industry advisory group of the New Zealand Food Safety Science Research Centre as part of my research for this talk, and I'm hoping that I'm able to give you a broader view rather than presenting a Zespri or a kiwi fruit view of industry food safety priorities. Our customers, our consumers, expect their food to be safe. We heard earlier today about us not actually thinking about whether our food is safe or not when we consume food, especially when we consume food in New Zealand or when our consumers consume food that has been produced in New Zealand. Testing capability has increased substantially over the years and will continue to increase. The levels of sensitivity for test methodologies continues to improve. I was at an industry advisory group meeting a few years ago where chemists were being accused of making our lives more difficult. There is a continuous drive for standardization of test methods. Despite the focus, despite the investment, despite the risk management approaches, you heard Rob speak about the impact of food safety globally and what the cost of that is economically and to humans and to human health. The fast food sector is becoming more and more focused on food safety. COVID-19 made people nervous about food safety. Our whole world changed. People were concerned about whether they were going to get COVID from food or food contact packaging. And our world continues to change. Genetic modification will be part of the solution for global food security and the climate crisis. There's a recent example. The Queensland University of Technology has developed a genetically modified Cavendish banana. This is the first Australian genetically modified food to be registered. There are examples of GM in feedstocks. You heard Lane earlier talk about precision fermentation using genetically modified organisms. What do we understand about the safety of these foods? Food is changing, our landscape is changing. Food categories and types of food are being blended. You heard Roger earlier talk about the functionality of food. It's becoming more important, food as nutrition, food as medicine. So change is a constant. I think that's a real important factor for what we're dealing with and why we need to understand where to focus. So I'll talk about three things. Number one, risk-based. We believe as an industry that it's important that our decisions, our risk assessments, our risk management, and our risk communication is risk-based, science-based, and evidence-based. And we need to be really well informed about these risks. ESR is doing a really good job of this for us, for the New Zealand food industry. Science, research, regulatory scanning to understand what's changing in our global marketplace. The relationships between larger food companies and business-to-business context. There is an expectation around traceability and data sharing, and this brings into question things like IP, for instance, when we talk about sharing data and data interoperability with our customers and clients. So these are all priority areas for us to think about in terms of risk-based approaches. I have an example on the screen for you where the center came together collectively when China, based on its concerns about the possible transmission of COVID-19 via food and food contact packaging, tried to propose an ISO standard for testing food contact packaging for COVID-19 virus. This was really concerning for the New Zealand food industry. The centre used scientific evidence to strongly support that COVID-19 is not a food safety hazard. This highlights the importance of the power that we have of the academic, the regulators, and industry coming together through the centre. Across the various sectors in New Zealand, we continue to have the key priorities around biological hazards, chemical hazards, and physical hazards. The other thing that's really changing in the risk space is changing consumer behaviour. One of the examples of this that I have from the seafood sector is food that is intended to be cooked prior to consumption is being consumed raw. So that's quite worrying for the seafood sector, where they rely on the consumer to cook the food as the final control measure. I have another example which horrified me slightly. I recently did a course on circular economies and sustainability strategies. We talk about credible and trusted sources. One of the discussions that was presented during that course around food waste prompted us, the students, to think about whether we should be disregarding best before dates and instead relying on the sniff test. Consumer patterns are changing. So the second area of priority for us is market access for the New Zealand food industry. Some of my counterparts believe it should have been 3 priorities: market access, market access, market access. So you've seen these numbers already today. Export is a key area of focus for the New Zealand industry. Over $50 billion in economic value for the food industry, food and fibre industry. Global regulations are changing, and we need to be at the forefront to understand the changes and implement risk management approaches to respond to that. There are many examples where changes in the global marketplace have an impact, and I have one such example from Zespri to share. We got caught out a couple of seasons ago. We had a detection of a compound in the EU. This is a compound that was not on our radar. It cost our industry $10 million. And it was because a new MRL had been introduced in the EU. When we did research on the food safety risk of that compound, there's no risk to human health. It was really difficult for us to track down the source, but we now have preventative controls in place to help us manage that risk. You heard earlier about food contact packaging and the shift towards recycled packaging. Research shows that many countries around the world have regulations that specifically prohibit the use of recycled content in food contact packaging. But there's a massive drive from the sustainability teams in our companies around introducing recycled content in food contact packaging. So there's a real tension there for us to manage. And there's a discussion later on today that I'm really looking forward to that'll unpack that some more for us around sustainability. So number 3, in terms of our top 3 that I picked, is capability building. And you heard Lane talk about it this morning. We must invest in human capability. This is absolutely critical. We need to think strategically about workforce development. Pierre shared a great example with us where Fonterra is working with the Food HQ in Palmerston North. This is about developing and sharing food safety science capability and skills. What about social science? What do we understand about social science and the intersection of social science and food safety science? How to understand and influence human behavior, because that has an impact on food safety. Risk communication in the food safety space, the capability to communicate food safety at all levels of our stakeholder network, whether it's our growers, our farmers, our fishers, people that work in our pack houses and production facilities, or at the board level. Because how we communicate risk and impact to the board makes a difference on what the board and what companies are willing to invest in food safety science and food safety science research. Who are the industries that are leading risk assessments and risk management? We look to the airline industry, and they absolutely lead risk assessment and risk management. I recently read a book titled The Checklist Manifesto by Dr. Atul Gawande. Surgeons learning from the airline industry around how to manage risk and reduce the risk of infections during surgery. Simple checklists to help us, guide us, manage risk, assess risk. And our priority remains to build effective risk management programs. HACCP has been around since the 60s, internationally adopted in the 90s. It hasn't changed a lot. We now talk about food safety culture. Frank Yanis really coined that and brought that to the forefront. And it's really, how do we get people to understand that the decisions that are made every single day of people that work in our industry has an impact and makes a difference on the safety of the food that we sell to our consumers? I haven't been dinged yet. Dings. So finally, and to close it out, I think our priorities are changing, and it's really important that we're aware of what's changing and how we stay current, how we adapt, and how we cope with what the future will bring for us. So it's, from an industry perspective, it's about risk-based approach, science-based, evidence-based. It's about market access, and it's about the future generation. It's about building that capability. And I would like to finish with this short whakatoki: Manaki whenua, care for the land. Manaki tangata, care for people. Haere whakamoa, go forward. Vinaka vakalevu, which is thank you in Fijian.
Vinaka vakalevu indeed. Thank you, Farzana. That was terrific.